I had the pleasure of interviewing Corey Anthony. Corey is the Senior Vice President of Human Resources and Chief Diversity Officer for AT&T Services Incorporated. His responsibilities include identifying and developing leaders, aligning employees with the company's vision and priorities, and employee engagement. He also leads AT&T's efforts to leverage its leadership in diversity and inclusion. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today, Corey. Can you tell us about your backstory?
I can, and I'll give you the really brief version, Jamie. But so I've been with AT&T now 22 years. I started with AT&T when we were called Southwestern Bell, which is one of the regional Bell operating companies back in 1995. So the company was really small then, Jamie. We had literally around 52,000 employees or so. And so fast forward 20 plus years, and now we're a global company with, close to 260,000 employees around the world. I've been fortunate. I've had an opportunity to work in every part of AT&T, every business unit, and around the country in teams. I've had responsibility of teams around the globe as well. So it's been really cool career here, and opportunity to make an impact and meet a lot of different individuals across this business.
All right, sounds good. Now, can you share with us any funny or interesting stories that happened since, leading the company?
So since I've been here, yes, it's a lot of stories, right, over 22 years. But I'll tell you one that's more recent for me, Jamie. And it's not as much funny as it is really interesting. In this role, and I've been in this role that I'm in now for roughly a year. And one of the things that has really become evident to me, and I knew this intellectually before I stepped into this role, but it's become even more real for me over the last year or so. And that is this notion, this dynamic, that all of the things that our employees are experiencing outside of AT&T impacts how they interact and treat other employees inside of AT&T. And so I'll give you a more recent example that really brought this home for me. Last year, around the country, we were having this really heated debate and discussion around whether or not we should be taking down Confederate monuments. Recall that conversation? It's been one that's been happening for years, but it really intensified last year. And I had employees that approached me. So this was unsolicited on my part, but employees who approached me proactively and shared with me really passionate perspectives on both sides of that issue. Some employees who were really passionate that we should take down those monuments around the country, and some employees who said, no, they represent history and we shouldn't. And so one of the things that, and you think about that has zero directly to do with anything AT&T is doing, right? So it's not an AT&T product or service or market. It's not a business issue for us. But all of our employees, especially those sitting in the United States, which is about 200,000 people, they are experiencing that. And they brought those emotions, those passions that were attached to those positions, they brought those inside of the business. And I saw how that affected how they interacted with other employees in the business. Because while it's not an AT&T issue, these issues come up, whether it's at the water cooler, it's at lunch, it's in a staff meeting, you name it. Eventually these issues enter the workplace. And so that really impacted me, right? In terms of what should we be doing as a company? What should we be doing differently as we talk about diversity and inclusion in the company? And so one of the outcomes of that, Jamie, was some thinking that I had to say, you know what, as I witnessed, just observed how we were all interacting with each other and having discussions around these issues, there were two things that were really evident to me that were problematic. One is that our employees tended, or as I witnessed this, we definitely see it outside of AT&T, but I saw some of this inside of the business as well, where people were really closed-minded, very narrow in terms of how they viewed the issue, right? And then as I had more conversations with them, I realized that in large part, that was driven by us being in these echo chambers. And these echo chambers is basically where I consume my information, I interact, my learning comes from sources that already feel and think the exact way that I do. So it just reaffirms what I already believe. And then when you're in those echo chambers, it leads to the other issue that we have is binary thinking, meaning binary, zeros or ones, right? It's either only one or two possible outcomes. And so what that ends up doing is creating this false dilemma that there are only two outcomes. And in reality, most of these issues, like this issue around the Confederacy, you name it, they're way more nuanced than that. They are not that simple. And so when we think about it in a binary way, it really creates a toxic environment to try and have an effective conversation. So we've said at AT&T two things. We're challenging all of our employees to do two things. Get outside, step outside of your echo chambers, and avoid the binary thinking. And if you do that, then we believe that you start to move from just tolerance of each other and each other's differences to fully understanding and embracing those. Gotcha. And then when you do that, by extension, you're having really positive impacts on the culture of this company.
Gotcha. And so by having your employees to, go outside of, their echo chamber, what has been the feedback from everyone about, going about that and stepping outside of their comfort zone?
So that's interesting, right? And when I speak to groups, both internally and externally, I warn people, Jamie, ahead of time. I do it. I have a ritual that I step outside these echo chambers on a daily basis. So just to ensure that I'm not being narrow-minded in my thinking. But I warn people in advance that it can be a painful experience if you've never done it. Because you are going to hear people, you're going to consume this information that's 180 degrees from where you are today. And your immediate reaction is going to be, look, that is asinine, right? That's nonsensical. That's crazy. I can't believe. And because you probably have formed or developed some really passionate perspective on these issues. So I tell people, hey, you have to do it more than once. Number one, you can't just go, you can't do that one time when you drive home from work and think, okay, I've checked that box. Now I can go back to my echo chamber. So you have to commit to it, and it will be painful. And that is the experience that I have gotten from folks, is that when they initially did it, it was difficult. So that is some of the feedback that I have received from folks. But they always follow up with that, though, Jamie, to say, look, while it may have been painful initially, it was hugely helpful, incredibly helpful in terms of them thinking about issues differently and having more empathy for people who do not already believe what they believe. And they say, look, when that happens, then I'm better able to interact with folks. And the ones that lead teams inside the business said it has helped them from a leadership position because they can connect with the entire team better than they can if they have not considered alternative perspectives on some of these issues.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you so much for that. And let me just ask you, what makes AT&T different from other companies that are out there?
Yeah. So is this my opportunity to brag a little on AT&T as well?
You can brag.
Yeah. There are a number of things that are different. I think one of the things that's really cool about AT&T, and we are really proud of this, is just a long history that we have on these issues. As I say, I'm a huge hip hop fan, Jamie. And if you ever listen to hip hop, then one of the sayings that we have in hip hop is, "Hey, I'm not new to this. I'm true to this." That's AT&T. We're not new to this. So we have been actively involved, been one of the leaders as it relates to diversity and inclusion for decades. So that's one of the things that makes us unique or makes us different in this space. The other thing is the level of commitment from Randall Stevenson, our chairman, and our board, throughout the entire organization to the person who's on the front line servicing the customer. There's this shared commitment to creating a culture and environment where we appreciate those differences and we celebrate those differences and we extract all of the value of us collectively in those differences. So that makes us unique, I believe, at the company. And then the last thing I would point out is, and this isn't just my perspective, because obviously I would be biased, but it's the external third parties that come in and take a look at what we're doing inside of our business. And then they look at that and they compare that to the other companies. And as you see them, they rate and rank us often on that. And year after year, we are always identified as one of the best companies in the world. for diversity and inclusion. So we're really proud of that. We're excited about that. As much as I love to talk about that, one of the things I always say is we are not declaring victory. We still have work to do. As good as we are at AT&T, we realize we have work to do. And we won't stop until every one of our 250,000+ employees can say that, look, at AT&T, I feel like I can achieve my fullest potential, irrespective of what I look like, who I love, whether or not I have a disability. None of those things matter. It is whatever my potential is, and how hard I work and how smart and how I apply myself will determine my potential in this company.
All right, I'm loving it. I'm sold. All right, all right. Now, also, are you working on any new or exciting projects right now?
We are, a number of them. So one, I talked about a little earlier, right? This platform around getting outside of echo chambers and binary thinking. Part of the reason I didn't say this earlier, why that is so exciting too, is because, Jamie, that not only adds value to AT&T, but when you are a company our size and when you have over 250,000 people, then to the extent we get that right inside of AT&T, then by extension, you're affecting the communities where our employees live and work, right? And so that becomes something that's really good for this country. And so that's why I get so pumped about that one, because I think the implications of that, man, are just huge. There are a number of other things that we're doing, how we are engaging in our communities now. Because at AT&T, it's very important to us to not just simply have customers and not just simply sell you products and services, but also just improve the plight of the folks in the communities where we work and serve. And so we are engaging those communities in a way that we never have, right? And this really grassroots work with local organizations, very localized. While we are a global company, but a lot of the work that we are doing is very localized. I'll give you one proof point, one example. It's some work that we are doing now in the city of Chicago. And we all know some of the challenges Chicago has, right, with gun violence, as an example, and some of the education challenges that they have. Well, we are working with local organizations there in Chicago. We know that the vast majority of the gun violence really is in about 19 or so communities in Chicago. Mm-hmm. So it's not all of Chicago, it's sort of focused, right? And we are working with those communities. We're working not only with other businesses in those communities, with individuals who are trying to stand up businesses, so to promote economic growth. We're working with the education system in those communities, both public and private entities, that we are, giving access to some of those schools, to some of the technology that we use inside of our business to help them perpetuate better education opportunities in those communities. So I get really excited about that, and we're doing that in multiple cities around the country. Mm-hmm. Right. So again, when we're looking at these markets, not only is just customers, but also it's just great citizens in those communities as well.
Thank you. And now, what advice would you give, other executives in your position in making sure that, the employees will, stay engaged, stay on point, and just, staying focused? What advice could you give?
So this is going to sound very fundamental, Jamie, but it's very powerful. But there are a few things. One, I would say it absolutely has to start at the most senior leadership in your business. So in our instance, that's the board of directors and our chairman. The commitment to it has to begin there, right? Because if you don't have it there, it is going to be really hard to make it a part of your culture throughout the organization. So it has to start with the leadership. Two, you have to ensure that all of the leaders in the business understand that it is an integral part of their responsibility to help create an environment and sustain and foster an environment of diversity and inclusion. And you have to hold them accountable. So at AT&T, it's an expectation that we're really clear about. Randall, our chairman, makes it really clear what his expectation of all of the leaders in the business is. And he holds us all accountable for that. So that is part of our valuation in terms of whether or not you're performing and meeting expectations in this business, is what are you doing on that front as well? So those two things are very important. And then the third leg in that stool is make sure that you have plenty of opportunities for training as well as development and mentorship of the folks in your business. Because you want your business, the profile, your leadership profile to reflect your employee body as well, right? As much as possible. So you have to be really focused. You have to be intentional about identifying the talent in the business, making sure you're developing that talent, making sure you're exposing that talent to all of the other leaders in the business. And you have to be really intentional about it. And if you do those things, you do those three things, then I think you're a long ways down the road of creating an environment that really values and appreciates diversity and inclusion.
And now, is there a particular person who you are grateful for that helped you with your success?
Excuse me, Jamie. Man, that's a good question. There are a number of folks who've been really valuable or instrumental for me. Look, it started for me. I was blessed. It started for me at home with my moms and my pops. But when I think professionally, there's a person who stands out. It's a gentleman by the name of Ray Wilkins. And when I joined the business, he was one of the senior leaders in the company and one of a really, really small number of Black senior executives in the company. And he was the first Black senior executive that I ever knew personally, because I grew up in a really small rural part of Texas, so we didn't have corporations where I grew up. I didn't have anyone in my family who was in that type of profession. So in college, I met Black professionals. I met a ton of Black professionals in college, my internships, et cetera, but not a senior executive. And so Ray Wilkins was the first Black senior executive that I got to know personally. And it wasn't just the fact that he was a Black executive. He helped mold me, right? He was a mentor of mine, literally for day one. It was just good fortune that my first job in the company happened to be in his organization. And he was the type of leader who really invested in talent. And he the day that I showed up, basically, he started mentoring me and still mentors me to this day. But he really instilled, some really key lessons for me around leadership. But probably the most important thing that he did for me, Jamie, and he never talked to me about this, it was just the observation, just the fact that he was where he was doing what he was doing, is that because of Ray, I understood and realized that, look, it is possible for me, being a Black male, that I could do anything in this business. My only limitation was going to be my talent, my hard work, and my leadership. Mm-hmm. And Ray made that real. He made that tangible for me. And so, huge influence. Okay. And on top of all of that, he's a really fun guy too.
That's always a good thing, always a good thing. And, definitely, talking about, Black men in leadership,
yeah,
and, senior management, being a senior executive, you have, other, Black men and women that are out there. And, they're watching this right now and they want to know, okay, well, can they do it? And, what tips can you give, specifically for these Black men and women who would like to get into roles, that you're in right now?
So I would start, excuse me, with the question, can you do it? Absolutely. So absolutely. So I would say to anyone out there is don't limit yourself in terms of what you think your possibilities are, especially if you're limiting yourself based on your color, your skin, your race, etc. Don't let that be your limitation. Don't buy into that. Some folks along the way may try and project that onto you, but you definitely should not internalize that, and don't limit yourself in that way. So number one, I would say, yes, it's absolutely possible, and you have to believe that. And there's evidence of that all around us, not just at AT&T, but just in industry, period. So there's evidence. It isn't just me saying it. There's tangible evidence that it's possible. Two is be on your game all the time, right? Get your skills, because we are in an environment now, Jamie, and we're talking Black men in tech for sure. So it's even more acute what I'm about to say in the technology space. But your skills, right? How good are you at what you do? What do you bring to the table that really increases your value proposition to the company that you're at or any entity that you may want to work with, right? Fully understand that. What is your value proposition? Make sure that you know the difference between managing work and leading people. Because most of us and all of the folks that I talk to around this country, everyone is looking for ways and the opportunities to take on more responsibilities in their respective organization, which means you are going to be leading teams.
Yes.
And so one of the mistakes that some people make in technology is they get so focused on the technology aspect of it that they don't develop and hone their skills around leadership. And so that's really important that you understand that you lead people. You don't manage people. You manage work, you lead people, and become really, really good and effective at how you can motivate, inspire, and lead people. Because that is what can differentiate you in the marketplace. Because as I say around here, Jamie, all the time, I talk to every group of incoming employees because I have talent development for the company as well. So we have all of the leadership development programs specifically for cybersecurity or pick a discipline. But one of the things I say to these groups every time I talk to them is, look, at AT&T, there isn't a shortage of really smart people. We're very fortunate in that way. There's a lot of really smart people that work in this company. So that in and of itself is not going to differentiate you just because you're really smart. A lot of smart people. Wherever you got your degree from, I don't care if it's DeVry or if it's Harvard. That is not what's going to separate you or distinguish you as well, because we have a ton of all of those inside the business as well. But you really can separate yourself is by how well you can deliver results, drive impact, and lead people. And then the icing on that cake, Jamie, is if you can do all of those things and be really innovative in how you accomplish it. Mm-hmm. So if you can marry those skill sets with innovation, then the sky's the limit. And I would say that's not only applicable at AT&T, that's just period. That's just business. That's even if you're in not-for-profit, the same thing applies, right? If you want to be a leader, those things are very important.
Yeah, definitely. No, and I definitely appreciate your response to that, definitely. And also, how have you used your success as far as bringing, goodness to the world, just overall?
You know what? I love that question, man. That's a great question. So that's something that is really important to me personally because it's just how I was raised. It was instilled in me from day one. And my wife and I share that commitment as well. So I will tell you, one of the things, there's a number of things I do. Starting in my own household, it starts with me at home, ensuring that I'm the type of father, the role model, because I've been blessed with these opportunities to do a lot of things that I've always wanted to do with my career. And so make sure that, in my own household that I'm being a great example of what a father and what a husband should be. And then when I look at, okay, what am I doing specifically for the community beyond my own household? I spend a lot of my time, energy, and effort working with a few organizations. At the top of that list, one is CASA, the Court Appointed Special Advocates. So this is an organization that works with kids. It helps place kids who are in foster care. They've been removed from their parents, separated from their parents because normally their parents is because of some type of neglect or abuse. And so the government has had to step in, Child Protective Services, and remove those kids from the household. And then what we do in this organization is we find those kids a safe and productive home to live in. We help them through the court process of that happening, which can be very complicated. We partner with Child Protective Services throughout that process. And so that is having a huge impact on communities. And the sad thing, Jamie, is when we look at that population of kids, they are disproportionately Black and brown kids. They just are. It's just a fact. And so that's one of the things that, I'm doing in the broader community and then specifically in communities of color. The other thing that I do, I spend a lot of my time, energy, and effort and treasure on is an organization called Junior Achievement. And this is an organization that teaches financial literacy in our school education, primarily in public schools, but we do private schools as well. And we focus on schools and communities that are a little more challenged than others. And so the reason why I do that is because I am a firm believer in that one of the best things we can do to break the cycle of poverty is financial empowerment, economic empowerment. And you can't do that if you're not financially literate. And so for me, it's this virtuous cycle, right? And so to the extent I can help kids become more financially literate, they become more economically empowered. And we all see the data and statistics. If I am not in poverty, then I'm less likely to get involved with drugs. I'm less likely to get involved with crime. I'm less likely to have experienced pregnancy as a teenager. I could go on and on. But all of these negative things that impact our communities, the probabilities of a kid getting impacted by those go way down when they are not in poverty. And if they are in a safe, loving, caring household, which is why I spend my time, my wife and I, on those two causes, because there's no question that they're having really, really good impacts on the community.
All right, thank you for that. And finally, is there a person in the world that you would love to have a private breakfast or lunch with, and why?
And this person is alive or no longer alive?
It could be anyone. It could be, someone, fantasy. They could be alive. They could be, had passed on. We just want to know your thought process on that.
That's a good one. So you know what? I'll start with a person that's alive, and this may surprise you. One person I would love to sit down and have a conversation with is Jay-Z.
All right.
And here's why. One, I'm as I've said earlier, I'm a huge fan of hip hop, so I want to just
Oh wait, hello.
To be able to straddle sort of the multiple worlds all at the same time, right? So you have music and hip hop and everything that comes with hip hop, while at the same time he can be one of the, if not the foremost leader in that space. And then at the same time, sit down at the White House and have conversations with the president about things socially and, things we should be doing differently in the country to have a positive impact. And oftentimes those two are, juxtaposed, right? When you look at hip hop and some of the themes in hip hop, and then some of the things that, that President Obama and First Lady were working on, and you wouldn't necessarily see a natural connection here. But he's able to navigate all of those worlds and do it very well and at a high level. So I would just be curious as to sort of what tactics does he use to do that, and just his thinking and his motivation. So that would be one. If I just said overall a person who's alive or not living, at the top of that list would be Malcolm X. It would be Malcolm X for me. And the thing that has always fascinated me about Malcolm X and impressed me the most is his ability to change. And if you know much about his life, and I'm not talking, Jamie, that, hey, I used to drink Pepsi and now I'm drinking Coke. We're not talking those kinds of changes. Here's a guy who made just significant changes in his life to the core of who he was as a person, right? In terms of his early parts of his life when he was involved in criminal activity, and then when he made the transition and became a part of the nation, and it was really the spiritual focus. But at that time, this was a person, right? We've all seen and heard the speeches where some of the things that he was espousing, some of the positions he took. And then you fast forward, a few years later, and he had this experience when he went to Mecca, and he comes back, and then he basically changes again. And really just stepped away from who that person was and became a totally different person in terms of his core. The love for people was always there, but his teachings, his understanding were dramatically changed. And so that just fascinates me, man, because I struggle to be able to stop eating ice cream every night. Right? And so if I can't even make that kind of change, which is minor, how do you make these life-altering changes that are 180 degrees counter to what you were just yesterday? But you embrace it and you have enough discipline to make that change and then move forward on it and not look back. That to me is incredible. And I don't know many examples of people who have made that type of change and still were able to have the type of impact that he's had. That is just, it's incredible to me. So yeah, I would love to sit down and pick his brain.
Yeah. I would love to listen to that conversation myself. Definitely. Well, you know what, Corey, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your time, talking with me today, about, diversity, Black men in tech, definitely, Black people overall trying to get into senior levels of companies such as, AT&T. Is there like any last minute words that you would like to say, to anyone who is watching this, listening to this right now? What would you say to them?
Get started right now. If you're not already in tech, then jump in it. If you have the interest there and the desire to do so, quit waiting. Start right now. And if you are in tech and you want to continue to grow and advance and take on more responsibility and opportunities, or start your own business and develop some new technology, I will say too, man, take the risk. Take the risk. And so every time when that thought enters your mind about the 3 or 4 reasons why you shouldn't do it or why you can't do it, push that out the other side and look around you, because there are examples of brothers who are doing it right now. And we have plenty of them. And so look and watch what they're doing, observe what they're doing, learn from them. And if many cases you have the opportunity to reach out to them, interact with them directly, but quit waiting. Start right now, because you don't have tomorrow. Because every day you wait, somebody else is one more day ahead of you, because that's just the nature of competition now, right? And especially in the technology space. So I would say, hey, get in the game right now. Don't wait. You're reading this article, you're watching this video. The moment you finish with Jamie and I, get started right now.
I love that. Thank you so much, Corey. And everyone, you heard that right here. Tomorrow is never promised. Start right now.
Right now.
So, Corey, thank you so much again. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me today. Everyone, please go to Corey Anthony's LinkedIn profile. We'll have the description below. But thank you once again, Corey. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, Jamie.